whenever God calls you to multiple things, he gives you the grace for those multiple things. And for those individuals that have the grace on their life for a million different plates, I want to tell them the same thing that he told me, keep the plate spinning. It may seem like it's hard, because it was hard for me at the time, but the more you do it, God will, he will open the door and he will carry it with you.
Pastor turned tech leader and a millennial churchgoer explore the intersection of technology, culture, and faith, equipping you with innovative strategies to support you as you live out your calling, lead your churches with confidence, and step into the future together. This is the Give It Up Podcast. What's up, guys, and welcome back to another Give It Up podcast episode. And this is going to be one where we're not even sure what direction we're going to end up with, because we have the man, the myth, the legend, Sam Collier in the building. And for those of you that do not know Sam Collier, he was the pastor of Story Church Atlanta. And I say was because now he's an apostle, which he's going to share more about. And Sam also does a million different things. We like to call him a pastorpreneur. He's a mutual friend of both Vance and I, and so we are just absolutely thrilled and delighted to have him on the podcast today.
Come on, let's
go.
Yeah!
You have to jump in. You have to jump in there.
That was an introduction of a lifetime. I feel like my content isn't as great as that introduction, so I'm going to try to live up to it on these next couple of minutes.
Perfect.
I love it. Well, Sam, you and I actually met, I don't know, maybe 18-ish months ago, maybe a little longer, through our mutual friend, Pastor Adam Mesa in Rancho Cucamonga. And ever since he introduced us, we've been friends. We've been following each other's journey. God is obviously doing a mighty work through you and Story Church. Can't wait to dig into that more. But you want to say hi to our pod listeners real quick?
Man, yeah, I would love to. I am a massive fan. I feel like you're fanning, I'm fanning of Overflow, of Vance. I always say this, and I don't know if we're able to talk about this publicly, but I've had a few investors or individuals ask me about the value proposition of what Overflow is and why maybe they should invest or not invest. And I say, guys, listen, the technology is next level. The innovation is off the chain, but the wild card is Vance.
Wow.
That is the wild card. He is, you're prophetic. You are futuristic, right? I often compare you, and please don't say I'm, being blasphemous. I often compare you to Gary V, right? Like the Christian Gary V. You're like a prophet. For what's next. Because Gary will straight up prophesy to you, curse you out, and then tell you what's happening in the next 20 years. And I really feel like that's what God is, building you up as for this generation, man. And we need it. So it's an honor for me to be on this show, and I'm excited to just be among the ranks.
I want to talk about this real time because I actually don't view myself as a prophet, right? And we can break that down theologically, how to unpack that. But one of the first times I got on a call with you, you did something really interesting. It's never happened to me before. We were talking about Overflow. We were talking about a fundraise that you were doing at a time, capital campaign, I believe. Yeah. You were believing for a certain amount to take Story Church to the next level. And you said this, I remember it like it was yesterday. You go, Vance, prophesy over me. And so what I know about the prophetic is, I'm not trying to even read your mail. All I'm trying to do is encourage you and to pray God's word over the situation. And that's what we did. And we actually saw some miracles happen after that, I believe.
100%. Well, he says he's not I'll say it like this. He has a prophetic gift, guys. He's able to hear what the voice of the Lord is saying and release it into the atmosphere. And the reason I said prophesy over me is because you were already prophesying. And so I was like, can you keep going? Because you're already in this zone, and you actually prophesied a specific number that somebody was going to give us. And I thought it was crazy. And I'm not really into it. I know you're not into, we're not into the snakes and the weird, in 5 months your life's going to change kind of thing. We're not really into that, right? We want it to be normal. So the fact that you gave a number was very weird and very I took it kind of serious, because I was like, man, he doesn't do stuff like this. And we got that exact number. And I just couldn't, because it was kind of wild. You were like, somebody from outside of your ministry is going to donate. This thing is going to happen. And I was like, that's not going to, what are you talking about? And someone called me literally and was like, hey, I got to get rid of some money before the end of the year. And it was the exact amount that you spoke. So, you're prophetic to me.
Hey, man, I that encourages me, and obviously God has all the glory. What was cool about that, and Zoe knows a little background because she's obviously on the Overflow team as well. It came through crypto. Come on, somebody. God can work through crypto.
Yep. It came 100% through crypto. It's why, look, let's just pause, give a commercial break. Download the Overflow app today. Because it's awesome. We have used it. We're trying to make our way back around, right? Like, I love what Zoe said in the beginning. You got your finance teams and you're like, how do we get back? I'm like, Overflow is the next. We got to make our way back around. Every day we are coming down the highway back to the Overflow team, because when we were using the app, it just blessed us tremendously. And as you know, we've been through a lot of ups and downs and rounds. And so we're making our way back on over. So I'm a lifetime Overflow member, right? I just want to say that. And I just want to tell everybody out there, you need to download the app, because it transformed our ministry in so many different ways. And we're excited for when it will do that again.
Love that.
That's super kind of you. Thank you, Sam, for saying that. What I want to talk about with you is, you said you're doing a ton of different things. It seems like you're the type of person who puts all 4 burners on the stove on at the same time. You are not cooking with just one dish. You have all of these things happening. And I want to start with people putting pastors in a box of, this is what you do. A pastor does this, says this, acts like this, and you just knocked all 4 walls of that box down. And I want to kind of unpack your mindset of how being a pastor can be more than just inside the 4 walls of a church, and how you actually extend your reach and your ministry reach way beyond church ministry.
Ooh, what a big question. Zoe, you coming in hot. We got to pause for a moment and shout out Brad Laminet. And the reason I want to shout him out is because he said something to me in the middle of my pastoral journey, which I'm gonna talk about why he said this, because I think it goes in line with your statement about pastors kind of doing one thing. I do think there's some truth to why that ends up happening. And Brad kind of had to shake me out of where I was going. And he texted me and he said, hey, Sam, I just want to remind you to keep the plate spinning. Keep the plate spinning. And I was like, huh? He was like, whatever you do, keep the plate spinning. And I was like, well, I got so much to do. I'm focused. I got to get this organization off the ground. He said, I got you, but keep the plates spinning. And then he disappeared. And I thought about that. I mean, even to this day, but it was something I thought about for months, because at the time, I could not imagine keeping the plate spinning. Because I had one big plate that was spinning out of control. And that's kind of like what pastoring is. Let me say it this way. That's what pastoring can be if you're leading an organization that is, by the grace of God, hopefully making a massive amount of impact in a city. If you're doing it well, and Vance knows this probably more than most, and Zoe, I know, at Amplify and everything that you've seen happen, if you're doing it well, it can be all consuming. And at times to really focus in on it, like it's its own organism and organization in itself. It's a plate that has plates within it, right? So you're like, you want me to spin more plates than this one plate that has a million plates? What is happening? And but he encouraged me with that because he said to me, you know, your unique design and your unique call
Mm.
is to the body of Christ, to the local church, but it's also to serve the global church as well. So, and I just believe this, and I believe that he knows this. You know, whenever God calls you to multiple things, he gives you the grace for those multiple things. And for those individuals that have the grace on their life for a million different plates, I want to tell them the same thing that he told me, keep the plate spinning. It may seem like it's hard because it was hard for me at the time, but the more you do it, God will, he will open the door and he will carry it with you. So I don't know if that answered the question,
That's
but my
brilliant, man.
mentality around it is I got to keep the plate spinning.
Yeah.
Well, I want to talk about
What
a
are
couple of
some of
those
those plates
plates.
that you have
Yeah,
spinning
those
right now?
plates. Exactly. Yeah.
Please. I mean, y'all, you tell me which ones you want to talk about. I'll tell you the ones that's on the top of my head. We
Business,
just signed
music,
a
all those things.
yeah, okay. We just signed a deal with Capital Christian Music Group, and Capital Christian is about three different labels in one. So Motown Gospel, Capital Christian Label Group, and then an organization company called Rethink. And Belonging Co. is signed to Rethink. Sam Rivera is signed to Rethink. You kind of go down the list of these individuals. And we did a direct deal with Rethink Capital. And so we're in the Motown Gospel, Capital Christian Rethink House. And it really the deal took about 9 months to make happen, but we really felt like God was calling our house to produce a sound that didn't just come from Sunday morning, but also created an opportunity and a platform for creatives around the country who just needed a leg up. And so the brand is The Story Collective. If you go on Spotify, Apple Music, or whatever, you can look that up. Y'all know my background is music. So God asked me to kind of give up music for ministry. And it's been about 10 to 12 years since I've done music and on this level, and God has, he's brought it back. And so we're excited about that. We got about 3 records out, and we just, again, my thing was I was the artist that we're trying to get now. I needed an opportunity. I needed a leg up, and I didn't want to have to go to the world to get it. So that's that's one of the things that we're doing, as well as pastoring. As well as, at some point we're going to launch a church network for more churches that are wanting to be a part of what we're doing. And we're excited about that. I got a new book coming out soon called Dream Killers. Don't tell anybody. That's like an exclusive. We got a new book I'm working on, as well as some other things.
It's so good. Sam, talk to us about the business side too. And the reason why I want to go into all these different plates is because I do believe it'll serve as inspiration, and even not inspiration, just creative thought of like, hey, some other people are thinking about their approach to ministry in a dynamic way. You talked to me about some work that you've done with Chick-fil-A and other business endeavors. Yeah. What's your mindset around business?
Yeah, before pastoring, I had I think some of the places that Brad Lomenick was referencing, that I kind of put on pause, that now I've started to bring back a little bit. I had a big consulting agency. We had 2. One was called The Resource Group. That was me and Tony, my wife. Shout out to her. And then another one was called Collier Creative Services, which I still kind of have now. And one of the things that we did, we consulted a lot of organizations in several different areas. One was definitely diversity and multiculturalism. So that was one, organizations that were predominantly, Caucasian in terms of their constituency, and also in their leadership. We're trying to figure out, how do we turn the ship without losing everybody on the boat that we already have? And so we helped a lot with that. Vanderbloemen, we had a partnership with Vanderbloemen that was serving a bunch of churches around the country, and we were just helping to speak into that. Collier Creative Services and also the Resource Group also helped. We had a big partnership with Thrivent Financial at one time. Thrivent was up in Minneapolis, and they actually had there was once a time where Thrivent was 3 different divisions, and they had a church division, and they also had a holdings division. I know I feel like I'm using a lot of business terms. They had a holdings division, which just simply meant they owned like 15,000 companies.
Wow.
And in that division was an organization called Bright Peak Financial, which focused specifically on love and money. And so they were trying to figure out how to do innovative things. And so innovation was one of the things that we noticed was a massive challenge in really big organizations that were doing well. In other words, they were so busy working in the business, they didn't really have time to work on the business, and they had these innovative projects and ideas, but not the manpower to either get it done or the time or the margin. So our organization came in and helped them innovate. So for some, it was, hey, we're trying to go from here to there. What do you see around helping us do that with this new product that we have? And then we would come alongside and say, well, there's a few different items that you could do. There's some concepts. Maybe you do a concert series. Maybe you launch a social campaign, all of these other things. That's one angle. And then we would help them implement it. Or they would come to us and say, here's some things we've been wanting to do, but don't have the time to do. Can you help us do that? And so we've partnered with YouVersion on different projects that we've been able to do together. Chick-fil-A was one, definitely being on the road with them and hosting and doing some other things. WindShape is another. So that was my life before before I had something to do every Sunday.
And you still have these plates spinning. So I guess my question is this, and I hope this helps pastors, senior church leaders think about this as well, because maybe there's some plates that God has put in other people's lives as well. Yeah. Are these doors one that you've busted open or that you've just walked through? Like, how do you measure if you know you're graced for something? Obviously, you have people like a Brad Lomenick to encourage you to keep the plates spinning. But even without that, how do you assess, Sam?
Wow. I think God puts passions in us that lead us toward a certain direction. And I often talk about, and again, we're talking about this book. I often talk about things that keep you up at night. Yes. And when it's 2 or 3 a.m. in the morning and you're going, it's something here. I don't know the full Overflow story, but what I do know, Vance, is that there was a season where you were, and I think you still are, CFO at one time at this church that you were at. And all of a sudden there's this idea that you birthed, and now it's like, I would imagine that there was a moment you said, I don't think I can just leave this thing at the church that I'm at. There's a passion in me to help other churches. Something I believe was maybe drawing you out. And, I think we all have those feelings. But the other thing I would say around assessing is, God will give passions, and then we have passions as well. So I think the other question that you're asking is, how do we decipher between my passion and God's passion for me? Right. And one of the things I would say is, it's a really simple principle. It's going to seem elementary, but it really does work. Follow the favor. Follow the favor.
Wow.
So I had a mentor of mine tell me that once. You want to discern the voice of God and direction in your life, follow the favor. How do you know that God is opening this door? How do you know this is something God wants you to do? There's going to be favor attached to it. People are going to keep asking you to do it. Doors are going to fly open. There is a certain thing that happens in our life that kind of gets out of control. And it's that thing that we don't, and it's I think, Vance, you said it, that there are moments where we need to knock down doors, but oftentimes there's this in-between phase between us knocking down the doors and having the idea and the passion where God just starts to move. And it's in that space that you can kind of decipher, the will of God, because he's moving. And you say, okay, that's not me. People are calling me. People are asking me. I keep running into this unique problem in different places. I'm in the gas station and somebody said this to me. I showed up at a conference and somebody brought this topic up and I had a solution. Wait, what's happening? People are, these crazy doors. I somehow end up at the Nike headquarters. I'm just giving really weird and random occurrences. These are the types of things that God does when he's trying to get a message to you. I want you to move this way. So I would say follow the favor, and if there's favor attached to it, it's probably something that the Lord wants you to lean into.
That's a threads right there. Follow the favor.
True that. And that's one that you would do
post that.
10 on. 10 on and just like little breadcrumbs, hoping that favor's at the end of it, right? Follow the favor.
Well, I love the idea of follow the favor because it is really walking with the Holy Spirit, right? You know, if you're single and you're trying to ask out a girl and she's said no like 20 times, that probably not favor in that. Actually, probably a restraining order in that. So it's not about persistence in that situation. But in business, for example, I love this idea that you have around movement, right? Because God is moving. And so I talk to people all the time. Oh, you know, God has a business in me. God spoke to me about a business. And they want to be directed by God, but God can't steer something that's not moving. And so oftentimes it's just taking steps, right? And following the favor of God through that journey. Zoe, I want to do quick market research with you because the premise of this podcast is a little bit the combination of a pastor as well as a millennial churchgoer, which you obviously are. When you see pastors being multifaceted, kind of like Sam, you know, what does that do for you? Because I've seen haters on the other side of this type of stuff. I've also seen people that love it. Like, where do you land? Let's have an open and honest conversation.
Yeah, I love this question. I think it definitely piques a curiosity at first. I'm like, how can you do all this, let alone do all of it well and with excellence, right? In a way that's honoring to God. And then it also gives me hope because in my work, there was a long time where I'm like, I had this mindset of, because I was legitimately working in ministry and coming to the end of that season, to use a church term, I found myself thinking, how can I do anything else other than ministry? Totally negating the fact that everything you do can be ministry or ministry adjacent. Like you can still be serving the Lord outside of the context of the church building and outside of a ministry nonprofit organization. And so I think when I see pastors doing that, it's really encouraging because it means they have the same mentality I do. And they're not putting a lid on their sphere of influence that God has graced them for.
So good. Well, you said something super interesting in that where, you know, there is this thought of, man, how can we do all these things with excellence? Yeah. So that's kind of what I want to peel back another layer on, Sam, is like, you know, these plates are spinning. Yeah. How do you make sure that it's divine direction, not distraction for you?
Excellent. I could talk about this for an hour, if not 5, but I won't. I've got a million things popping in my head right now, so I'm going to try to choose one. I'm telling myself, stay focused, Sam. Stay focused. And and I think that's actually a great segue into how to do it well based on what I've learned. Focus. Right? Like, I think what we're talking about is focus. And I think the truth about it is you can't do anything well that you're not focused on. If your focus is split, it doesn't matter how great you are at it. If your focus is split, it's not going to be as great as it needs to be, as opposed to if your focus is on something. So the question becomes, and I have to I'm throwing this to what I learned vicariously living through Andy Stanley and Orange and the Catalyst world and all of these other things. The question becomes, how do you get a heavy amount of focus on a project that you're working on? Because the church is its own, right? It's its own entity. I could say monstrosity. Again, if you're doing it well. If you're doing it well, that's the other. If you're just like, all right, I'm out here, I'm just showing up to pray Bible study. If you're doing it well, it's a monstrosity, right? It's a lot of money coming in. It's a lot of money going out. It's a lot of souls being saved. It's a lot of marriages being restored. It's a lot of people being set free, and you're reaching a city. So if you're doing it well, it's a monstrosity. So how do you keep doing that well and start a record label and launch a conference and build a church network and do all of those well? Well, It's a Chick-fil-A, Mark Miller says this all the time. He just resigned, or not resigned, I guess he retired as the vice president of leadership at Chick-fil-A. And he said this: high performance teams do high performance things. And that statement, transformative to me. I piggyback that on top of what I learned at North Point, just by being around. You saw all of these different things coming out of North Point. Andy at one time was a part of starting Catalyst, which is this massive conference. It was him, it was Reggie Joyner, it was John Maxwell and Lanny Donahoe. And they built this 16,000 person crazy thing that then giant impact. While North Point is like 30,000 members at the time. And I'm jumping from location to location at North Point, 7,000 person on average at a location. And it's all of these things. Then all of a sudden you see Orange come out of North Point, or, come out of Reggie Joyner, who's at North Point, but there's this heavy affiliation. And then they launch a 10,000 person conference. And then you see big stuff. You're like, what are y'all doing? And one of the things that they taught me, they echoed the statement of Mark Miller. Here's another Chick-fil-Aism. When we have a problem, we put a leader on it. So for me, for me, my question is always, like literally, I'm going to bring you into my world. My question right now is, hey, Capital's awesome. I need a leader that can be focused on this every week. And doesn't mean I can't oversee it. Doesn't mean I can't guide it. Doesn't mean I can't take it with. I'm always going to be in the CEO seat. Like at the church, Zoe, hilariously talked about me being an apostle, right? Is senior pastor and apostle is my new title, but it just speaks into a function. And the function is I'm in more of a governing seat than I am in the practitioner seat, in order to make this thing run. And so for me, that's what I would say. I have found if you're going to do a lot of things or a few things well, and those few things have to have a heavy amount of focus on them, you have to find a high capacity leader that you can partner with, that then builds a high capacity team within that organization or within that specific initiative that will carry it out when you're having to split your focus or jump from one thing to the next to go, hey, is this rolling and is this rolling? And if you can do it well, then now you can have, right, your meeting of governors, and we sit around the round table and go, how's everything going? Here's where we want to go. So it's not easy.
No, it's not easy. My capacity is directly correlated to the people around me. To those, right? You're talking about empowerment. I mean, this is one small example, right? But the Give It Up podcast, right? Zoe largely owns a lot of the direction and what we do for the Give It Up podcast. Zoe, speak from your perspective really quick on somebody that's empowered. And there's a lot more things that you do, but what are things that allow you to be empowered? What are those things that allow you to be released, I guess?
Yeah, I think a big one that's been really influential is someone speaking life into you, because I'm one of those people who, this is actually my next question I want to get into, is this element of fearlessness, because I think that someone can cast a vision, a high level vision. And the first thing I think isn't, I know the next step to take. It's, how on earth are we going to get there? And so I think people that can come alongside and empower you, speak life into you, and then collaborate on what they believe the next right step is. Yeah. And what I like to call myself and how I see the world is really as a blueprint runner. I'm like, you just give me the blueprints and say, we're working on the kitchen first. And then I'm like, got you, And so I think that's a big element of it, is because there's so many people in the faith space who are so great at casting vision. But how do you take this and drop it right here to 100 levels lower to, we're just working on the first step? I think that's one of the biggest things for me.
So good. So good. That kind of makes me think, you have these plates spinning. We've talked about how it's important, Sam, for us to find leaders over each and every one of those. Zoe is mentioning, for a leader that's empowered, for her, what's important is to get direction on the next step or what the priority is. How do you contextualize that in your world? Let's take the music label, for example. You find leaders, you find a team. How do you take your big vision, your big ambition, and how do you break it down? What's that thought process like?
Wow. I had a season of my life. I feel like these are all big questions. I had a season of my life where I was struggling with I don't want to say with my faith. I think I would probably say with the outworking of my faith. I was struggling with the outworking of my faith. So I believed in Jesus, and it's actually everything that Zoe is talking about. I had this big vision. I think people will identify with this. Vance, do you remember the season? And Zoe, I know you probably do as well. Where it was like conferences everywhere. I mean, leadership conferences and everywhere you went, it was like this, that, and it was kind of before. It was definitely before the virtual conference season. It was conferences everywhere, and I remember going to all these conferences, and leaving the conference so excited. And, Louis Giglio would hop on stage and he would be like, there's somebody in the audience. You're not just called to the church. You're called to start a movement. You know what I mean? Or you're called to go start a skateboarding thing. And you're called to go... You're called to go revolutionize the tattoo industry, right? You just like all of these things.
Every sphere, every space.
Every space, yes. Yes, man. And I remember leaving those conferences going, what? Like, how do I do that? How am I going to start a movement? But I had all this vision, and they enlarged my capacity. They were enlarging my capacity, right? And now I'm up at 3 a.m. going, how am I going to start a tattoo movement, right? I mean, it's not technically a tattoo movement, but you get my point. And honestly, it led to a season of depression, because, to be really honest, because I did not know how I was going to start a movement, but I kept hearing that a movement was in me. So I went on a journey of discovery. And when you talk about the idea of working out your faith and studying to show yourself approved and owning your own development, that's the season I went to, because I got to a point where I was like, man, I can't just keep hearing the big message and not knowing the practicality of the message.
Come on.
And it's impossible for me to know the practicality of the message from going to conferences and church every Sunday. I need someone to sit. So that's when I talk about mentorship, right? And this is where mentorship starts to get amazing. But that was one of it. I started to go on this journey of going, I need to find somebody who has done this well before. And I need to... And there were so many mentors at the time that I don't even remember who told me this for the first time. But I remember one person or a few people saying to me, you've got to learn how to go all the way to the end and then build backwards to the beginning. And that's the journey I started going on. And we call it, we had an organization at the time and a group of individuals that were we were running together. And it was kind of, it wasn't the mafia at all, the Christian mafia, but it was kind of like the mastermind groups now that you have, early on. And we crafted and coined a term called peak state. It's what is the peak state of your vision? What is the peak state of Overflow? What's the peak state of Story Church? What's the peak state of all of these different of Capital and Story Records and Story? Where do we ultimately want to go? And we would get a whiteboard out. We would draw a picture of that. And then we would go, all right, now what do we need to do from there to get back to where we are now? And that helped me a lot with the practicality of the moment of going, okay, so if I want to go down the street, I got to take one step out of the house. Oh, no, the first thing I got to do, I got to get shoes. right? And so it's like, let me get shoes. I got to get running. I got to get walking shoes. And then after my walking shoes, I got to take one step out of the house. And then, oh, I think I got to do 20 of those. I got to make sure I have some water for the journey, so that's my simple answer. We can go deeper if you want, but that's my opening.
It's brilliant. And I think it's insightful because another key word I heard from you is mentorship, right? And all throughout this podcast recording, I've heard you say Brad Lomenick or a Chick-fil-A-ism. It's clear, Andy Stanley, it's clear that you are a byproduct of a lot of the people that you've invited into your life to speak into your life. Paul says, follow me as I follow Christ. Why didn't Paul just say, follow Christ? Right? Because we don't only need to follow Christ, right? We need to see people also pursuing Christ and what that looks like. Yes. And that's why he added that in. And so, yes, we follow Jesus directly, but also we need people in our world to show us what it looks like to follow Jesus.
Follow Jesus.
Yes, we can have an idea of business in our head, but at the same time, we need examples of people that have done it well. Mm-hmm. And that applies to every sphere and every space that we set our feet on. I want to talk about Story Church, because we've been talking a lot about things outside of Story Church, but Story Church in and of itself is a blessing. It is blowing up. People are being saved. People are being baptized. I've been seeing it from afar, hearing things directly from mutual friends like Adam Mesa that's been able to speak at your church, and hearing the direct report of the people surrounding this phenomena, this very inspirational journey. Talk about what's happening. What's God doing in Story Church?
He's doing what he wants to do, right? Like it's what I've been describing our journey as thus far has been like, I feel like I'm sitting in the back of a Tesla and there's no driver and it's driving. Right? It's driving, it's moving, switching lanes. There's an address. I'm just in the backseat going, where you want, God, where do you want us to go? And that's what it's been like. He's just going, we just got a building that we're breaking ground in the next couple of weeks on this building, 10,000, square feet. We're a year old, year and a half, a little over a year old. In terms of as an organization. Before that, as you know, many people know, we were Hillsong Atlanta for like 9 months. So I always say Hillsong birthed Story Church, right? And that was a season in itself of just ups and downs, and the phoenix rising, right, from a lot of the things that we were dealing with at that particular time. But it's just been it's been a miracle, to be really honest. I won't say the name of somebody that said this to me, but he said, listen, the amount of pressure and the amount of challenge that your organization has been through in such a short time, it should equal you not even being here. The fact that your organization is still here and has doubled in size and revenue is unbelievable. And so we just give it, we give it to God. And now, what we feel the Lord doing, he's birthing what we call an apostolic house. And the best way for me to explain this is to talk about an organization called Africa New Life. And there's a big organization called Africa New Life out of Rwanda. And there's a guy named Pastor Charles. His name's Pastor Charles. He's a Rwandan. He is a child of the Rwandan genocide.
Wow.
We recently went to Rwanda because our church is now sponsoring some kids over in Rwanda, but he calls their ministry an apostolic ministry. Now, he doesn't use language like apostle, but he believes in what you would call fivefold ministry. So his gifting would be more apostolic, and they've got pastors, and then some that are prophetic, some that are more evangelistic, all of these other things. But it was the first time for me that I was able to really see what I believe the New Testament talks about when it talks about this fivefold government and how it can produce a certain thing in the earth. Here is this guy who was a child of the genocide, millions and millions of Rwandans killed. And as a response to this, he gets his doctorate and plants this church. His church now has 10 locations. His church decided to become a house of hope for the region. He calls it taking kids from poverty to leadership.
Wow.
And so from an apostolic perspective, all apostolic ministry is it's the idea of taking ground. That's the idea. It's just the idea of taking ground. What does it mean for our church to be in a city, to operate in the kingdom, and to take ground in that city over a certain, every sphere, right? We go back there again. So you go to his school, his churches, Vance, and attached to his church is a hospital.
Whew.
I mean, a real hospital, like that they built from the ground up. They built a hospital from the ground up, 6 floors, nurses, doctors. I mean, all of this stuff that you need in combination with the government. You go to the other side of the property. They've got orphanages on the other side of the property that are taking kids that have grown up in poverty. You go to one side, they've got their own seminary, and they've done these organizations and this. I would just say these conglomerates all around the country of Rwanda, to the point where they have their own primary school from kindergarten up to 12th grade, and then obviously they have their own university and they have their own seminary. Their school is so successful; it's the #1 school in the country, the #1 school in the country connected to a church. And he looks at me while we're walking around. He says, "Sam, this is apostolic ministry. This is not what we've seen in the States where we prophet is so-and-so. And it's like, come on now. What are we doing? The weird stuff that we're not talking about that. We're just talking about bare bones. What does it mean for the kingdom to invade a city and to invade a space? That's what we're attempting to do at Story Church. Create centers of reconciliation, one around race for sure, but also centers of reconciliation for our city that launches leaders all around the city and all around our world today. So that's what we're doing, bro. And we finally got our building, HQ.
A hospital, an orphanage, part of the church, part of the building, part of the fabric, part of the architecture. This is God's plan. The book Rise of Christianity by Rodney Stark, me and my pastor read it several years back, and it changed my whole framework around why Christianity went viral. Christianity went viral because it met practical needs when it got off the ground, right? Yeah. And so you look at hospitals today, it actually birthed from the church. The actual idea of a hospital, right? There's the cross with the snake around it, right? Because it birthed from Christians, right? People don't really fully understand that or maybe even appreciate that concept came from the local church. Even if you go all the way back to Leviticus and the things that God would instruct his people at that time to do, like wash their hands, that was hygiene that preserved God's people in a season where the Roman Empire was killing babies, right? Christians, the people of the way, they were pro-life, they were pro-family. And that's when, just on a practical basis, Christian families multiplied, right? And so it's so cool to see that this is coming back. It's been said that apostles or people that have apostolic ministries have a pioneering spirit.
Yeah.
It's also been said that you can always tell a pioneer by the arrows on their back.
Ooh.
Right? So your level of wanting to be a pioneer is your level of your ability to carry pain and to endure. Your ability to be excellent is your ability to endure. And so I say, I'm inspired. I also say, we're praying for you because we know this mantle to carry on continuing to spin plates or to continuing to take territory is not for the faint-hearted. Is definitely not for the faint-hearted.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Zoe. Go.
Yeah, I was going to add to that by basically just asking you how you step into these territories where you don't have any frameworks that work in your context. So basically, you're starting from the ground up, and most people would hit that and say, no, I'm afraid to do that.
Yeah.
And you really walk into these new spaces fearlessly. One, how have you learned to fear a little bit less? And two, what would you say to someone else in this exact same position?
Wow. Dr. King said that, a movement starts one person at a time. And, it's interesting that his sister, his oldest living sister, or the oldest member of the King family, his sister, Dr. Christine King Ferris, just passed away this past week. And this past Sunday, I went to her homegoing service at Ebenezer Baptist Church.
Wow.
And in it, they were telling a story about how Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. gave his life to Jesus, which was very interesting. He was around 7 years old, and he went down to the altar at Ebenezer and gave his life to Jesus, not because he knew what was going on, but because his sister gave her life, or was talking about giving her life. And he said, I don't want her to be the first one. I got to go before her. So that's how he gives his life. So the whole premise of the sermon or the eulogy was what happens when sisters stand up, right? And it was such a beautiful ceremony. But in this at this funeral where we're watching the last sibling of Dr. King be eulogized, you're looking at the future generation of a movement that started a long time ago. So for me, when I think about the idea of a movement starting one person at a time, the question that I always have when we talk about individuals, that fearlessness and all these things is, who's going to be the next one to start it, right? God's calling all of us to take ground. He just is. When we think about the Great Commission and, Jesus' kind of final words to us in the world, it's, hey, I got to go. I'm leaving a helper. But I want you to go to all the four corners of the earth, preach the gospel, make disciples, right? Bring the kingdom. It is our mandate to go. And I would dare say this, if we don't go, who is going to go? And I'm not going to get too crazy because I could preach for the next 3 hours about this next thing. But the enemy doesn't have a problem going. Doesn't have a problem going. He will go, and he will inspire individuals to go and act on his behalf. We talk about the scripture, the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy, but I have come that you may have life, have it more abundantly. He does not have a problem stealing, killing, and destroying. He is going. And so for me, my statement is always, if he doesn't have a problem going, we cannot have a problem taking the first step. Somebody has to take the step for God's mission to be done in the earth. So I just want to encourage somebody with that statement of, if you don't go, who will go? And let's let the weight of a generation sit on our shoulders and empower us to do it afraid. Because if we can do it afraid, usually that fear will start to dissipate the more we go. T.D. Jakes always says this: fear can be in the car, it just can't have the driver's seat. You can be in the passenger seat, but you can't drive. But you can be right there. So that's my encouragement. And that to me, I think answers the question. For me, that's what gets me up in the morning is, man, if I don't go, who's going to go? Wow. And yes, God can use anybody, but he's elected to use me in this particular moment. I want to get to the end of my life, and I want him to say, well done. I want him to be pleased with me. We talk about Judgment Day and there's going to be a moment where we all get to heaven and go, what did you do? God's going to go, what did you do with what I gave you? And I want to be able to say, man, I built an apostolic ministry, and we put songs out, and, we revolutionized the technology space, right?
Yeah.
We had to give it up podcast. We did all of these different things. We revolutionized and we revolutionized the church as it pertains to technology and innovation in a world of AI, right? We could keep going down this. In a world of AI, who in the church is going to fill the gap of helping us come into an understanding of how to leverage these new tools of innovation for the sake of the gospel? This is what Overflow is, right? And many more. But it's y'all taking your place. But I want to take my place too. And so I think those are the things that get me up in the morning. And that's the inspiration that I want to give to this generation and to the next generation of like, man, let's get on it. The enemy doesn't have a problem moving. So let's do what we got to do.
So we're just going to start with music, business, and end with spiritual warfare. Is that what we're doing, Sam? We're gonna talk about Chick-fil-A, Brad Lomenick, and TD Jakes. We're gonna talk about the USA and Rwanda, just all in one podcast. Is that what we're doing, man? Dude.
That's who you are, man. You know that's your language. It's a global sound.
It's really fun. I mean, I think we prophesied it, Zoe, at the beginning that this podcast was going to cover some ground. We covered some ground. We took some territory. This was a phenomenal conversation. Sam, parting thoughts as we kind of pull this one up. Anything that you want to kind of share? I mean, to frame these last moments, we're talking to pastors, senior church leaders that have a mindset to want to innovate and want to take the church into new spaces and new places. What would be kind of a final thought to leave us with?
Yeah, I would say I would leave you with a thought that Bobby Grunwald gave me in London one day. I haven't spoken to him in a while, but he's one of the founders, if not the primary founder of YouVersion, the app. They've gone on to read, 3 to maybe 400 phones, million phones around the world at this point. And he said, the church should be the most innovative place on the planet.
Yes. Because
the church was created by the greatest innovator that we'll ever know, and that's God. He's a creator. He's an innovator. In the beginning, right? He created, and he's created us, I believe, to create, to innovate, to build on top of what he's already built on top of. I'll end with kind of where we've been this entire time. And it's, man, the Great Commission is our number one goal. That's why we exist, is to hopefully prepare the way for Jesus to return again. That's why we're here. Innovation speeds up that process. And so we've got to innovate at every turn. I love the Bobby Grunwald-ism. It's the church leaders, kingdom ambassadors, which are Christians. We should be the most innovative people on the planet because we were created by an innovator.
Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Sam Collier, our friend, your friend now too, by listening to this pod. We appreciate you. Thank you so much, man, for being on the pod.
I love you, bro. I love you, sis.